Hello and welcome to another Avid tutorial. This one's actually a little bit of a DaVinci Resolve tutorial wrapped up in an Avid tutorial because the topic today is an alternate way to transcode your media using DaVinci Resolve, which is free. If you want to download it, you don't need a license or anything. And if you've watched some of my other tutorials, I talk in some of those about the standard way that we bring media into Avid, which is to link it in, and then once it's in Avid, we'll do a transcode and convert it into the format Avid wants it in, and it'll create files that go into this Avid media files folder, and everything works really smoothly, and that's all great. This is just an alternate method of transcoding your media that can be useful if, for instance, maybe you have somebody on set who has their laptop, they don't have an Avid license, but they can download Resolve and they could start transcoding stuff right away so it's ready to go and start editing as soon as you're done shooting. Or maybe you want to do some color correction on something before you bring it into editing, which you can do in Avid, but I think it's actually a little smoother to do in Resolve this way. So anyway, this is just an alternate method of bringing your media into Avid in the first place. I have a folder here with some clips, this thing that says class shoot footage for Avid demos, and just a few clips in here that I'm going to use for this demo. This would work with any number of clips, but I'm going to keep things simple and relatively short. Those are the native camera files, and so I want to go ahead and get them into Avid to do some editing on them. So in this case, instead of bringing them in directly into Avid, I'm going to go over to Resolve and start here. And I'll go into my media pool and find my media, which is on this drive, class shoot footage. And here it is, and I'll just select all these and bring them into my media pool and change the frame rate of my project to match all of them, which hopefully you should all have the same frame rate. Pop over to my edit window. Again, I'll select all of these, and I'm just going to throw them into the timeline. I'm not going to set any in or out points, do any editing. I'm just going to take all my clips and throw them into one timeline together. Now I could go ahead and just transcode right from here, and this would work fine. But in this case, this is some footage that was shot on a Sony FS7 in a log mode, so it's a little washed out. It hasn't been through color grading yet. And I could certainly edit with this. I've done that before on plenty of projects, but it actually would be a little nicer if I can bring this looking somewhere closer to normal before I edit it. Just looks a little nicer while I'm going through my edit. So I'm going to do an additional step and just pop over here to my coloring tab. And I could color grade each of these individual clips if I wanted to before transcoding them, and that would work. I'm just doing this down and dirty. I'm going to go color grade my whole timeline, and just looking at this footage, knowing how it was shot, I'm going to darken it down a little bit and then just throw a Sony LUT on it to get it back to looking somewhere approximately like normal. So this isn't necessarily great, but it looks better than it did in the log mode and closer to what eventually you might want to end up with. And I think it's important to note here, I'm doing this for my transcodes so they look a little nicer while I'm editing. My plan here is not that this is a final color grade or I need to get it perfect. This is not going to end up baked into the original footage. It's just in those down converts that I'm using for my offline creative edit. And then when I'm done, those files are going to relink back to the original full res, full quality camera media to do my final color grade. If I was going to use these as my final clips that are actually what's going to end up in the finished movie, I would obviously spend a lot more time getting the color grading right, but I also don't want to waste that time doing that before I even edit the project because some of these shots might not even end up in the movie, who knows. So I just threw a basic color grade on the whole timeline. Go back to my edit window, I still got all these clips here. And this is really simple. I'm going to go over to my Deliver tab over on the far right here. So now I'm looking at what it is going to transcode for me, and I want to make sure this says entire timeline. If you had a range selected, it would not end up outputting all of the clips. And first thing I want to do here is, instead of outputting that whole timeline as a single clip, I want to set this to individual clips so that it does each of these files as something separate to edit with in Avid, so those come in as the individual files that we want them to be. I'll set where this is going in my browse location, and I'm just going to put a little folder here. I'm actually going to end up having to move this folder, but I'm going to put it here so you can see where it is. I'll call that transcodes. On the File tab, for file name, I want to set it to source name so that it uses the same name as the original clip. And this is one of the things I will say, when you do your transcodes in Avid, everything just kind of works behind the scenes and it all works out very straightforwardly for you as long as you follow the right procedures. This method does work fine, but there's a lot more little things that can go wrong, or little tweaks that you have to remember to do something in a particular order and such. And I'll show a quick demo of that at the end of this tutorial. But it's one of the things where this just can be a little wonkier. You have to pay very close attention to what you're doing. You can use unique file names. If you think you might have multiple clips with the same name in the same folder, that can be a problem. And then you would have to use this. I find this works better if I leave this unchecked and just go with the source name. Over in the audio tab, I want to make sure the bit depth matches whatever my Avid project is. So if it's 24-bit, then I should set that. For channels, I'm going to set this to same as source. So whatever audio channels are in the original track, that many will get transcoded over. And then importantly, over here in the video tab, for the format, this is crucial. I want to select MXF OP Atom. And this is going to make it so that I don't have to do another round of transcoding later. Because if I transcode these in Resolve and then have to transcode them again in Avid, I've basically wasted my time and done an extra step that didn't accomplish anything. The goal here is to do my transcodes here and then just bring them right into Avid and they work natively and I don't have to mess with anything. And I need to make sure I have it in this type of wrapper if that's what I'm doing. Inside that, I can choose my codec and I'm going to do either a DNX HD or DNX HR. Those are the two native Avid codecs that it wants to work with. There are some other things I could use, but these are going to be my best options. If it's HD, obviously I will work in DNX HD. If it's higher res than that, I'll have to use the DNX HR. This is actually UHD footage, but this is just my offline creative edit. So I'm just going to make it into 1080 footage. And I'm actually going to select my lowest bandwidth version because I don't care if it's super high resolution. This looks perfectly fine for an offline creative edit. So I'm just going to do that. So I've got these set. I know what folder it's going into. It's making individual clips and I'm doing them by their source name. Once I've got all that set, I can add this to the render queue over here and hit render all and it'll start rendering. And I'll come back in a second after this is done. It's just going to take a minute or minute and a half. Okay, so that's done and we're back. Obviously, if you had a lot of clips and they're very long, this would take longer to do. You might need to leave it running overnight or something, just like you would with transcoding things in Avid sometimes. In this case, it was just 4 clips, so it went very quickly. So at this point, I'm done in Resolve, and I'm going to pop myself back over to Avid. And you'll notice nothing has happened yet, but let's take a look at these files I made. So they're in this transcodes folder. And you can see in here, I have a whole bunch of MXF files. In this case, all of these clips had 8 audio tracks in them. So each file ended up as a video clip and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 audio clips, which is the way Avid wants them in its Avid media, with each audio track and each video track as its own separate file. So that's fine. This is all set the way we want. And then what I'm going to do is, remember in Avid, it's very particular about where media lives that it's going to work with natively. And it has to be in this Avid media files folder, and it has to be inside this MXF folder. So I'm just going to take this and put it in here. Obviously, I could have just had it output directly into there, but I wanted to kind of show you that it can go anywhere when it's doing the transcode and resolve, but then it does have to end up in here. Now I do that and nothing's going to happen in Avid. You'll see this is still just the same. And the reason is inside this MXF folder, remember Avid very particular, not just about locations, but names. It doesn't want a word like transcode or something else like that. Everything inside the MXF folder has to be in numbered folders. So I could number this 2, I could number this 1000, whatever I want, but just some numbered folder. If you want to use some code for your date or what reel it is or something, that can be a way to keep track of what's what. And now when I go back here into Avid, you'll see that it did a quick scan of that and found all this stuff. So I know something happened. Nothing showed up in my bin yet because I still have to do one more step, which is to actually bring this into Avid. So I'm going to right click in my bin, go input, import media, and I'm not going to import the actual clips. What I'm going to do is go into that new folder I created, and Avid created these 2 files when it scanned this folder, this .pmr and .mdb file, and I'm going to select the mdb, this database file that tells Avid what all the stuff is in here, and select to open that, and boom, these clips pop up in here. They are ready to edit, and I am ready to go. And that's how you transcode your media in Resolve to use in Avid. I do want to show you real quickly how you would round trip this back into Resolve if you were doing your creative edit in Avid and then you want to go back and do your coloring in Resolve. You can absolutely do that. It's got the correct metadata and stuff to do it. But again, you have to be a little more particular if your media was transcoded out of Avid than you do if it was done in Avid, where it's a little better at keeping track of everything and making sure that information travels with it. I'm just going to throw together a very quick little edit here. Just throw a couple of these clips in random sort of order, and let's just shorten this down a little bit. Okay, so I got a little sequence here. So let's say my edit is done. I'm finished with my creative edit and I'm ready to go back into Resolve to do my color grading. I'm going to, just because I'm anal about this, set an in and out pointer on my sequence. I'll go to export file and I'll just put it on the root here. And I want to export an AAF file, which is normally how I would get back into Resolve. And I'm just gonna not even bother with the audio and just do the video because I'm imagining I'm doing this for coloring. I might be exporting my audio separately to go into Pro Tools or wherever I'm finishing my audio. I'll do that and just call this from Avid to Resolve. Okay. And now I'm back in Resolve and let's say I was starting a new project here. So I come in and there's nothing in here and I'm going to show you what you might think you would do because it would be how you would normally bring your AAF in out of Avid and you'll see it doesn't quite work right. So I'm going to say import timeline and I'll find that AAF file I made. Great. And I'm going to go ahead and say link it to the source camera files. And I'll do that. And it looks like everything came in, right? Here's my sequence. It's edited the same way that it was in Avid. But if you look carefully, what you'll see is this already has that color grade baked into it because this is actually looking at the transcoded files I made. It hasn't reconnected back to the original full res media. So you can see here's the clips it's using. And if I do reveal one of these in Finder, you can see where it is actually it is inside that media files folder. That's the one it's referencing, which is not what I want. I want to be able to color based on my original full res media. So let's get everything out of here and try this again. What I need to do, if I did my transcodes in Resolve instead of in Avid, when I bring in this AAF, is I'm going to need to first bring in all the original clips. So I'll go into class shoot footage. Here it is. I'm going to grab all these, bring these into my project. Once I have those original clips in the project, now I'm going to import my timeline. And again, I'm going to tell it link to the source camera files, but I'm also going to uncheck this box for automatically import source clips into the media pool because I don't want to try to import the transcoded files it was working with. I want it to look for those source camera files, which it hopefully will already find here, and just work with those. So I'll hit OK. And here's my sequence. It's back in here, but you can see now it is the original log footage and it's working with the original full resolution clips again, which was what I wanted. So that would be the correct way to do this. And as you can see, it works fine. You just have to be precise in what you're doing and do some things in a particular order and be a little more careful about that than you do if you did your transcodes in Avid. But I hope this is useful for you if you're in one of those situations where it is beneficial to be able to transcode outside Avid. Now you know how to do it and then still bring your files right into Avid and work with them there. Good luck with your editing. And if you enjoyed this, tell a friend and take a look at some of my other Avid tutorials. Thanks.